What's going on, everybody? Noah Sanford here, hanging out on Lake Mead right now on the bass boat, coming at you guys with the Thursday fishing report as always. So we're going to talk about water temperatures, wind conditions for the weekend, what I've been catching my fish on, and how I have been catching them in the areas that I've been getting bites. So let's jump right into it with wind conditions. So this weekend, the wind looks pretty decent. Tomorrow looks all right, Saturday looks all right, and Sunday looks all right. I think the worst it's gonna be is like 17 miles an hour. And I think that's on Sunday. So the wind shouldn't be bad this whole weekend. However, once we get into Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, pretty much the beginning of next week through the middle of next week looks pretty bad wind-wise. So if you're gonna go out soon, I would probably plan on making it in the next couple days. Moving on to the water temperature. Right now, looking at my Garmin, it says 54 and a half. So that's actually surprisingly warm right now. And that's because we're out here at a little after 1. So middle of the day, afternoon, the water temps are always gonna be a bit warmer because it's cold at night, right? 20s and 30s at night. It's cold in the morning. And then as we go on throughout the day, it warms up a little bit. Like I said, what we're looking at right now, water temp 54 and a half, but typically what I've been seeing throughout the week is anywhere between as cold as 52 and a half to kind of 53 and a half, maybe 54 if you're lucky. So I'm actually pretty surprised it's that warm right now. I must be in a little warm patch, but you're probably gonna be looking between 52, 53 and a half. That's probably gonna be your water temp. So moving on to what most of you guys wanna hear, where I've been catching these fish and how I've been catching them. So if you guys saw the video from yesterday, if you haven't, check it out. I'll link it in the description. But basically, Rylan and I went out and we fished for, I don't know, 2.5, 3 hours. We only got a handful of bites, but they were good bites. And so that's kind of the trend in the wintertime. You only get a handful of bites unless you get really lucky one day. But for the most part, you only get a handful of bites, but they're usually good quality bites. So like I said, what I've been catching these fish on, mostly finesse or bottom type crawdad imitating baits, okay? So that's gonna be stuff like jigs, drop shots, Ned rigs. Any variation of those things have been 99% of what I've been catching my fish on. And then moving on to where I've been catching them, basically we have a rocky point coming out here and it's on kind of like this main lake point. So that's really kind of been the areas I've been catching them. Finding those good areas with give or take a 45-degree angle going down into the water. So steep enough, but not too steep to where it's a vertical face. And then having a good mixture of big boulders and small rocks the size of anywhere from like a softball to a basketball. So I like to find those big boulders, 5, 10 feet wide. And then here and there, you'll have those smaller chunk rock mixed in. So that's kind of been the texture that I've been catching these fish on. And then in the depth range, it's been usually between 15 and 25 feet has been what I've been catching them on. Rylan hooked a couple last night up shallow. And I think that's because in the evening time, last hour or so or daylight before it gets dark, when these fish are on these rocks, they actually move up and they root around looking for stuff to eat. So if you're out in the middle of the day, morning, midday, I would focus on that 15, 20, 25 foot range, a little bit deeper, right about that visibility where you can't see the bottom anymore. And then as the day goes on and you get to the evening, I would maybe focus a little bit shallower because recently the trend has been as that last hour of daylight is coming, as it's getting dark, it seems like these bass are moving up a little shallower and you're getting bit in more like 8 to 12 feet of water. So even 5 feet, I think Rylan hooked one of his fish as shallow as just a couple feet yesterday. So really goes to show you that these fish are gonna adapt to the conditions just like us fishermen have to adapt to the conditions in order to catch them. So that's pretty much the overview of the week, guys. That's what I've been catching them on and where I've been catching them. When it comes down to how I've actually been working the baits, slow, 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 okay? I tell people all the time when I'm guiding, when you're fishing, as soon as you think you're fishing slow enough, fish it even slower, okay? This water's cold, guys. It's the coldest that these fish are probably gonna see all year. They're sitting down there on the bottom. They're trying to stay warm. They don't wanna expend a lot of energy for their meal and their metabolism is low, okay? There's been a ton of studies done that in the wintertime, some bass have only eaten a handful of times all throughout winter. So they typically like to go after those bigger meals, and they don't want to have to use a lot of energy to do it. So your average adult-sized bass, if it can just eat 1 or 2 big crawdads a week, that's probably enough to keep it going, since they're not really moving around and they're not expending a lot of energy. So like I said, guys, make sure to fish those baits slow. And I like to use a bigger bait. However, sometimes you can catch them on smaller baits too, but typically I like to throw my bigger worms this time of year, because for me, my whole philosophy on it is that if a bass is gonna expend some energy and try to eat something, he wants the biggest meal that they can get, right? So that's kind of my whole idea behind it. But anyways, guys, that's gonna be the overview going into the weekend. So make sure you guys get out there and catch some bass this weekend. Appreciate you guys always tuning in. My name's Noah Sanford. We'll see you guys out on the water.